My father died on a Tuesday. The same day he'd always said was cursed. I never believed in his superstitions, but standing in his empty house 3 days after the funeral, I wondered if he'd been right all along. Because what I found that night would prove that some warnings aren't superstitions. They're protection. I'm 47 years old, and I thought I knew everything about the man who raised me. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The house smelled like him. Old Spice cologne mixed with coffee and that peculiar scent of old books. I'd grown up in this house, played in these rooms, learned to ride a bike in that driveway. But I'd never been allowed in the attic. Not once. Not ever. Promise me something, sweetheart, Dad had said when I turned 16 and got curious about the locked door at the end of the upstairs hallway. Never go up there. Never open that box. What box? I'd asked. You'll know it when you see it. Just promise me. I promised. For 31 years, I kept that promise. But now he was gone, and promises made to the dead feel different. They feel breakable. I stood at the bottom of the attic stairs with his keys in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. The brass key was tarnished, older than the others, with a red string tied through the hole. My fingers trembled as I fitted it into the lock. The door opened with a groan that sounded almost human. Dust particles danced in the beam of my flashlight. The attic was smaller than I'd imagined, cramped and stuffy with summer heat still trapped in the wooden beams. Boxes lined the walls, but I saw it immediately. The box. Just like he'd said. It sat in the center of the room on an old wooden chair, as if displayed. As if waiting. A medium-sized metal lockbox, army green and military grade, with another lock on the front. The same red string was tied around the handle. My throat went dry. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, lock the door, and forget I'd ever come up here. But grief does strange things to logic. And curiosity, once awakened, is a beast that can't be caged. I knelt in front of the box. The second key on the red string opened the lock with a click that echoed in the silence. Inside, I found my father's secrets. And they destroyed everything I thought I knew. The first thing I pulled out was a photograph. A woman I'd never seen before, stunning and dark-haired, laughing at the camera with her head thrown back. She wore a yellow sundress and stood in front of a beach I didn't recognize. On the back, in my father's handwriting, Elena. Summer of 1976. 1 year before I was born. My hands shook as I dug deeper. Letters. Dozens of them, tied with that same red string, all addressed to my father in elegant cursive. All from Elena. I opened the first one, and her voice poured out across the decades. My darling James, I cannot stop thinking about yesterday. The way you held me under the pier, the way you whispered my name like a prayer. I know this is wrong. I know we're playing with fire. But I would rather burn with you than live cold and safe without you. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just an old girlfriend. This was passion. This was an affair. But who was she? And why had Dad kept these letters hidden for nearly 50 years? I read through the night, sitting cross-legged on the attic floor as the story unfolded in Elena's beautiful, desperate handwriting. She was married. So was my father. They'd met at a conference in California, two people trapped in loveless marriages who found something electric and impossible in each other. The letters grew more intense. More dangerous. James, I'm scared. Thomas is getting suspicious. Last night he asked me why I smile at my phone. I had to delete all your messages. But I saved them in my heart. Every word. Every promise. Tell me again that we'll find a way. Tell me this isn't just a beautiful dream that has to end. I pressed my hand to my mouth, fighting nausea. Thomas. I knew that name. Thomas Fitzgerald had been Dad's business partner in the 70s. I'd met him once as a child, a stern man with cold eyes who'd come to our house for dinner. If Elena was Thomas's wife, then this affair wasn't just wrong. It was betrayal on every level. The letters continued through the summer and into fall. The tone shifted. Became frantic. James, I need to see you. Something has happened. Something that changes everything. Meet me at our spot. Please. I'm begging you. That was the last letter, dated October 1976. The next item in the box was a newspaper clipping from November 1976. My hands went numb as I read the headline. Local woman missing. Elena Fitzgerald, 29, disappears without trace. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The article said she'd vanished after telling her husband she was going shopping. Her car was found abandoned near the coast. Police suspected foul play but had no leads. Thomas Fitzgerald offered a $10,000 reward for information. The case went cold. I dropped the clipping like it burned me. What had my father done? What had happened to this woman? My mind raced with horrible possibilities, each worse than the last. But then I found the medical records. They were folded carefully, preserved in a plastic sleeve. Hospital documents from Santa Monica Medical Center. Patient name, Elena Fitzgerald. Admitted November 7, 1976. Cause, emergency childbirth. Status, deceased. The baby's birth certificate was clipped to the records. Mother, Elena Fitzgerald. Father, unknown. Date of birth, November 7, 1976. Baby girl. Weight, 6 pounds, 3 ounces. My birthday is November 7, 1976. The attic spun around me. I gripped the edge of the box, gasping for air that felt too thick to breathe. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But there was more. A handwritten note on hospital stationery, the paper yellowed with age. Mr. Morrison, your daughter is healthy. Elena didn't make it through the night. Internal bleeding. I'm sorry. She made me promise to tell you that she loved you both. That she never regretted it. The baby is in the NICU, and child services will need to be contacted. I've done what I can to keep this quiet, as you requested. God forgive us all. It was signed by a Dr. Richard Chin. I sat in that attic as dawn broke through the small window, holding the pieces of a puzzle that reformed my entire existence. Elena hadn't disappeared. She'd gone into hiding to have the baby. To have me. And she died alone in that hospital while my father did what? I looked at the woman I'd called Mom my whole life in a new, horrible light. Catherine Morrison. She'd married my father in December 1976, exactly 1 month after Elena died. A shotgun wedding, everyone had said. So romantic. They'd eloped and returned with a newborn baby girl. Me. I'd never questioned it. Never thought twice about the timeline, because why would I? You don't interrogate your own origin story. You accept it like you accept gravity. But now I saw the truth. Catherine wasn't my mother. She was the woman my father had convinced to help him hide his greatest sin. Elena was my mother. The woman in the yellow sundress laughing at the camera. The woman who wrote about burning with love. The woman who died bringing me into this world. If you're watching this and you've ever discovered that your whole life was a lie, write it in the comments. Because I need to know I'm not alone in this feeling. This feeling that the ground has opened up and swallowed everything solid you ever stood on. I stumbled down from the attic as the sun rose, clutching the box to my chest like a lifeline. Or maybe like evidence. I didn't know which anymore. Catherine. I needed to confront Catherine. She lived 20 minutes away in a retirement community, the same woman who'd braided my hair and taught me to bake cookies and held me through every nightmare. The same woman who'd looked me in the eye for 47 years and never once told me the truth. I drove there in a daze, running red lights I didn't see, my mind replaying every childhood memory through this new, sickening lens. Every time she'd said, "I love you." Every mother-daughter dance. Every birthday cake. All of it built on a lie. Had she ever tucked me in at night and felt guilty? Had she ever looked at my face and seen Elena staring back at her? Had she resented me for being the living proof of my father's greatest betrayal? She answered the door in her bathrobe, her white hair uncombed, her face creasing with worry when she saw my expression. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I opened the box, I said flatly. The color drained from her face. She aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, he said he destroyed it. He promised me he'd destroyed it. So it's true." My voice broke. All of it. She was my mother. Elena. And you knew. You've always known. Catherine's hands shook as she reached for me, but I stepped back. I couldn't let her touch me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Let me explain," she pleaded. "Please, let me explain." "Then explain," I said, my voice cold as winter. "Explain how you could lie to me for 47 years. Explain how you could let me grow up not knowing who I really was." She opened the door wider, and I followed her inside, my heart a stone in my chest. We sat in her living room, the same room where we'd had countless cups of tea, where she'd taught me to knit, where she'd shown me her wedding album. That album. Those pictures of her and Dad, so happy, so in love. All of it staged. All of it a performance. "I loved your father," Catherine began, her voice trembling. "I loved him before Elena, and I loved him after. We grew up together, James and I. Everyone thought we'd get married. But then he went to California for work, and when he came back, everything was different." She twisted her hands in her lap, staring at something I couldn't see. "He told me about her. About the affair. He was racked with guilt, but he couldn't stop. He said it was like being possessed. I was heartbroken, but I waited. I thought it would burn itself out. These things always do, don't they? Get to the part where my mother died," I said harshly. Catherine flinched but continued. "When Elena got pregnant, James panicked. Thomas was violent, you have to understand. If he'd found out, he would have killed them both. Elena ran away. James helped her hide, sent her money, but he couldn't leave his own family. He had a wife. Responsibilities. He had a wife?" I nearly screamed. What about my mother? What about his responsibility to her? To me? "I know," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "I know it was wrong. But Elena, she died, sweetheart. She died giving birth to you, alone in that hospital because she was too afraid to use her real name. By the time James got there, you were in NICU, and she was gone." My vision blurred with tears I refused to shed. "And you? Where do you fit into this horror story?" "He came to me," she said quietly. "He showed up at my door at 3 in the morning with a baby in his arms. You were so tiny, wrapped in a hospital blanket, crying like your heart was broken. And maybe it was. Maybe somehow you knew." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the truth in her eyes. The complicated, messy, painful truth. He begged me to marry him. To help him raise you. Thomas was already searching for Elena, and if he found out about the baby, about you. James was terrified. And I was weak. I told myself I was doing it for you. That you needed a mother. But the truth? I wanted him. Even like this. Even with another woman's child. I wanted him so badly that I agreed to build our entire life on a lie. The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of deception. "Did you ever love me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Or was I just the price you paid to get him?" Catherine's face crumpled. "I loved you from the moment I held you. I swear on my life, I loved you. You weren't the price. You were the gift. You were the one pure thing in all that ugliness. And every day, every single day, I tried to be worthy of being your mother. But you weren't my mother, I said, the words like knives in my throat. Elena was. And I never got to know her. I never got to know who I really am. You're my daughter, Catherine said fiercely. DNA doesn't make a mother. Love does. Showing up does. Staying does. I stayed, sweetheart. Through every fever, every heartbreak, every triumph. I stayed. I wanted to hate her. God, I wanted to hate her so much. But looking at this old woman crying in front of me, I saw something I'd never seen before. I saw her sacrifice. Her choice to love a child that wasn't hers, to raise me knowing I'd hate her if I ever learned the truth. Dad kept that box, I said slowly, working through it. He kept those letters, those pictures. Why? Penance, Catherine said simply. He never forgave himself. For Elena. For lying to you. For asking me to lie. That box was his confession. His burden. He went up there every year on Elena's birthday. I'd hear him crying through the attic door. Something in my chest cracked open. A small fissure that let in a tiny beam of light. Thomas, I said. Elena's husband. What happened to him? He died in 1982. Drunk driving. He never knew about you. Your father made sure of that. He was protecting you from that man until his dying day. I thought about my father then. Really thought about him. Not as the perfect dad I'd idolized, but as a flawed, broken man who'd made terrible choices and spent the rest of his life trying to make them right. Who'd loved two women and lost them both in different ways. Who'd carried a secret so heavy it had bent his spine. There's more in the box, Catherine said softly. Did you see the journal? I hadn't. I'd been too shocked by the letters and documents to look further. But that night, I returned to the attic one last time. The journal was at the bottom, leather-bound and worn. My father's handwriting filled every page. It was a letter to me. One long, desperate letter written over 40 years. My dearest daughter, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've broken your promise. I don't blame you. Some promises are made to be broken. Some truths refuse to stay buried. He told me everything. The whole story from his perspective. How he'd fallen in love with Elena like falling off a cliff. How he tried to do the right thing and failed at every turn. How Elena had been afraid but brave, how she decided to keep the baby even though it meant losing everything. She died for you, he wrote. And I've lived for you. Every day since November 7, 1976, I've tried to be worthy of her sacrifice. I've failed more than I've succeeded. But I want you to know that you weren't a mistake. You were the one beautiful thing that came from all that pain. You were proof that even the worst sins can create something sacred. He wrote about watching me grow up, about every moment of pride and terror. About wanting to tell me the truth 1,000 times and losing his courage each time. He described my first day of kindergarten, how I'd looked back at him with Elena's eyes and he'd almost collapsed right there on the sidewalk. He wrote about my high school graduation, sitting in those bleachers knowing that Elena should have been there beside him, that she would have been so proud. He wrote about walking me down the aisle at my wedding, terrified that someone would see the resemblance and ask questions he couldn't answer. Every milestone of my life was documented through the lens of his guilt and his fierce, protective love. I kept the box because I owed her that much. I owed her a place in this world, even if it was just a locked attic in a house she never saw. I kept her letters because they were proof she existed. That she loved. That she mattered. The journal entries became more frequent in recent years, as if he'd known his time was running out. He wrote about his regrets, about the conversations we'd never have, about the grandmother my son would never know existed. I see her in you every single day, one entry read. The way you tilt your head when you're thinking. The way you laugh with your whole body. The way you love so fiercely it scares you. That's all Elena. That's her legacy living on in you. The journal ended with a single line that broke me completely. Forgive me if you can. Know me if you must. But please, please, love yourself. You are her legacy. Her gift. Her hope. Don't let my mistakes make you doubt that you were wanted. Desperately, completely, impossibly wanted. I cried then. Really cried. For the first time since he died, I let myself grieve. Not just for him, but for Elena. For the mother I'd never know. For the woman who'd given everything so I could exist. And somewhere in that grief, I found something unexpected. Forgiveness. Not the easy kind. Not the kind that erases the pain. But the kind that acknowledges the complexity of being human. The kind that recognizes we're all just stumbling through this life, trying to do better, failing, trying again. The next morning, I called my son. He was 23, living across the country, building his own life. I told him everything. About Elena, about the box, about the grandmother he'd never known existed. Mom, he said after a long silence. That's heavy. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. But I needed you to know. You deserve to know where you come from. All of it. The good and the bad. Grandpa always seemed sad, he said thoughtfully. Like he was carrying something nobody else could see. Now I understand why. We talked for hours. About family, about secrets, about the ways love can twist us into shapes we never intended. He asked about Elena, wanted to know every detail I could remember from those letters and photos. And I realized that by telling him, I was giving Elena something she'd been denied. A place in her family's story. Recognition. Memory. Catherine helped me plan it. She didn't have to, but she did. We found Elena's grave in a small cemetery in Santa Monica, unmarked except for a simple stone with her name and dates. My father had been paying for its upkeep for 47 years. Another secret. Another act of penance. I brought yellow flowers. Sunflowers, like the dress in the photograph. I sat on the grass next to her grave, and I talked to her. Told her about my life. My career. My failed marriage and my beautiful son who'd never know his grandmother's name but would know her story. I forgive him, I told her. I don't know if I should, but I do. And I forgive her too. Catherine. She wasn't perfect, but she showed up. She loved me the best way she knew how. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, I could swear I felt something. Approval, maybe. Or release. Or maybe just the natural world reminding me that life goes on, even after the worst betrayals. I wish I'd known you, I whispered. I wish I could have heard your voice, seen your smile in person instead of in faded photographs. But I carry you with me. In my eyes, in my laugh, in the way I love too fiercely. You're not forgotten, Elena. You never will be. I visit her grave once a month now. I bring flowers and updates. I tell her things I can't tell anyone else. And sometimes, when the light hits just right, I can see myself in the small photo I placed on her headstone. Her eyes. Her smile. Her legacy. The box sits in my home now, not locked, not hidden. I look through it sometimes when I need to remember that the truth, however painful, is always better than a beautiful lie. I've added to it photos of my son, copies of achievements Elena never got to witness, letters I write to her when the grief feels too heavy to carry alone. Catherine and I are rebuilding our relationship. It's not easy. Some days I look at her and see only the lie. Other days I see the woman who rocked me through nightmares, who taught me to be strong, who chose love even when it cost her everything. We're learning to exist in the messy middle ground between resentment and gratitude. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever discovered a secret that changed everything, drop a comment below. Let's remind each other that we're not alone in this messy, complicated, beautiful disaster called life. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Real stories. True stories. The kind of stories that prove life is stranger and more heartbreaking and more hopeful than any fiction could ever be. My father always said never open that box. But I'm glad I did. Because inside wasn't just his shame. It was my history. My truth. My mother's love story. And that was worth every moment of pain. Some boxes are meant to be opened. Some secrets are meant to be known. And some ghosts are meant to be laid to rest. Rest in peace, Elena. Rest in peace, Dad. And thank you, Catherine, for showing me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice. And you chose me every single day. That's a kind of love too. Maybe the most powerful kind of all.